She said no to a billionaire, and he couldn't handle it. Lila Adeyemi, a confident and independent woman, refused Alexander Drake's world of wealth, power and luxury, but he's not giving up. Drawn into his dangerous, glamorous world, Lila discovers secrets that could change everything and put her trust, and her life, at risk. Will she survive the temptations, the danger, and Alexander's relentless obsession? Find out in this thrilling tale of suspense, romance, and power. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to stay updated on the next twist in their story. The grand chandelier in the Marlowe Hotel ballroom cast a warm, golden glow over the elegantly dressed guests. Crystal glasses clinked softly, mingling with quiet laughter and the low hum of conversation. This was the kind of charity gala that drew socialites, celebrities, and, most importantly, the kind of wealthy people who believed the world revolved around them. Among them, Lila Adeyemi moved with a quiet confidence that seemed to make her invisible to the crowd, or perhaps untouchable. Lila was petite, standing barely 5'3", but her presence carried weight. Her skin was a rich, deep brown, smooth and radiant under the soft chandelier light. Her natural curls framed a heart-shaped face, emphasizing her almond-shaped eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Tonight, she wore a sleek, emerald green gown that hugged her curves without being showy, paired with minimal gold accessories. She smiled politely at the passing guests, her gaze scanning the room, yet she seemed to belong entirely to herself. Across the room, a hush passed over a cluster of men who had just caught sight of him. Alexander Drake, billionaire, CEO, and the kind of man people whispered about when his name came up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a chiseled jawline and icy blue eyes that could simultaneously intimidate and mesmerize. His dark suit was tailored to perfection, and the confidence in his posture suggested that he had never encountered a situation he couldn't control, or a person he couldn't sway. Tonight, his attention was fixed on Lila. Alexander approached with the slow, deliberate grace of someone accustomed to command. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and deep, carrying effortlessly over the chatter. He held out a hand that was as strong as it was inviting. Lila turned, her almond-shaped eyes meeting his piercing gaze. There was something disarmingly bold in the way he looked at her, as though he already expected her to say yes before she even opened her mouth. Yet, she smiled politely and extended her hand. "Good evening," she replied, her tone calm but measured. "I'm Alexander Drake," he said. "And you are?" "Lila Adeyemi," she responded, letting her hand fall gently. "I work in design and philanthropy. I'm a guest here for the cause, not the company." His eyes lingered on her with an intensity that made her spine tingle, not unpleasantly, but enough to make her aware of every detail of her own posture. "I've heard of you," he said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Word travels fast when you're someone who refuses to conform." Lila tilted her head slightly, curious despite herself. "And do you approve of that?" she asked. Alexander chuckled softly, a sound that seemed more like a challenge than amusement. "I admire it," he said. "Most people I meet these days wouldn't dare say no to someone like me." Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from the audacity in his words. "Then you'd be surprised," she said, her voice steady. "I say no when I need to." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "No, you say no?" He took a step closer, and Lila instinctively shifted, placing a small but deliberate distance between them. "To me?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. Her eyes didn't waver, they met his with a fearless honesty he wasn't used to encountering. "I'm not interested in exchanging my independence for wealth, influence, or whatever else you're offering." For a brief moment, Alexander's blue eyes flickered with surprise. He was so used to acquiescence, to admiration that bordered on desperation, that Lila's refusal felt like a physical blow. He smiled, but there was a cold edge to it now. "Bold?" he said, almost to himself. "Very bold. I like that in a woman, but it's dangerous." "Dangerous?" Lila echoed, her voice teasing yet cautious. "I prefer independent over dangerous, thank you." He studied her for a moment, as if measuring her against some invisible standard, and then leaned slightly closer. "You don't know what you're saying no to," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. There was a hint of warning in his tone, and yet a magnetic pull she couldn't ignore. "I do," she said evenly. "I know exactly what I'm saying no to. And I've made my decision." Alexander chuckled again, this time a bit more genuinely. But there was an unmistakable edge of fascination mixed with frustration in the way he looked at her. "Few people have the courage to refuse me," he said. "Most either say yes, or they disappear from my attention entirely." You've done the impossible. Lila's lips curved in a small, polite smile, though her heart was racing. Well, I suppose I'm impossible then. Perhaps, he replied, a dangerous gleam in his eye. But impossible can be intriguing. Before she could respond, he turned on his heel, moving away into the crowd, but his gaze didn't leave her. Lila felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the room. She couldn't decide if it was the thrill of being so bold or the sense that she'd just caught the attention of a man who didn't take no lightly. She tried to brush off the encounter, focusing on the charity work that had brought her there. But throughout the evening she felt his presence like a shadow at the edge of her vision. Alexander Drake, the billionaire who didn't accept refusal. People whispered, glasses clinked, and she mingled with other guests, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Later, as the gala drew to a close, Lila stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The city lights stretched out beneath her like a river of diamonds. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering tension from her encounter. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" a familiar voice said from behind her. She turned, expecting a passerby, and found him there, Alexander Drake. He leaned casually against the railing, yet there was an intensity in his posture that suggested he wasn't here for small talk. "You didn't think you could escape that easily, did you?" he asked. Lila crossed her arms, holding her ground. "I wasn't trying to escape. I just needed a moment of fresh air." He smiled, a small, knowing smile that made her stomach flutter. "Fresh air," he repeated softly. "Or time to think about me?" She raised an eyebrow, amused despite herself. "I was thinking about the gala, the guests, the charity work. You, perhaps, were a small part of my thoughts." She said it calmly, though her pulse betrayed her amusement. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focused interest. "A small part," he mused. "You're very careful with your words, aren't you?" "I prefer honesty," Lila said simply. "Honesty," he repeated, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I admire that even when it's inconvenient. And yet, you still refuse me." "Yes," she said firmly, letting her gaze meet his. "I refuse you because I refuse to give up who I am for anyone." He leaned back slightly, studying her with a mixture of frustration and admiration. "You're remarkable," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But I don't take no lightly." Lila smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and caution. "Then you'll have to learn. I don't change my mind for anyone, no matter how persistent." Alexander's lips curled into a half-smile, his icy blue eyes holding hers for a long, deliberate moment. Then he stepped back and nodded, almost acknowledging a challenge he hadn't expected. "We'll see, Lila Adeyemi. We'll see." As he walked away, disappearing into the crowd once more, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. There was something about him, something dark, compelling, and dangerous, that tugged at her curiosity even as it warned her to stay away. And for the first time in a long while, Lila realized that her refusal, bold as it was, might have just drawn her into a world far larger, far riskier, than she could ever have imagined. The next morning, Lila tried to convince herself that the encounter at the gala was just a fleeting moment, an unusual, unnerving curiosity she could ignore. Yet, as she sat in her modest studio apartment, sipping her coffee and scrolling through emails, she couldn't shake the feeling of Alexander Drake's icy blue eyes on her. The memory made her pulse quicken and her mind uneasy. By noon, that uneasy feeling became reality. Lila received an unexpected message. An invitation to an exclusive design exhibition sponsored by none other than Alexander Drake himself. The message was polite, professional, but underneath it lay a subtle insistence she couldn't ignore. She debated ignoring it, but something about his calculated tone made her hesitate. When she arrived at the Drake exhibition hall, her breath caught. The space was vast, walls lined with rare art and bespoke designs, each piece more extravagant than the last. Lila's eyes widened, not at the opulence, but at the thought of stepping into the world of someone who had just moments ago tried to bend her will. And there he was. Alexander Drake, perfectly poised, exuding confidence in a tailored navy suit, every movement measured, every gesture deliberate. His icy blue eyes locked onto hers the moment she stepped inside. "You came," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Not a question but a statement. "I did," Lila replied, keeping her tone even. "Professional courtesy." He smiled, a mixture of amusement and admiration, and gestured to the exhibition. "I think you'll find some inspiration here, if you can keep your mind on the work rather than my charm." Lila's lips curved slightly, resisting the pull his words had on her. "I'll manage," she said, moving forward but keenly aware that Alexander wasn't just following her physically, he was observing her, analyzing every reaction. As the day progressed, Lila found herself navigating a delicate dance. She met artists, collectors and socialites, all part of Alexander's curated world of luxury and influence. She marveled at the creativity around her but was constantly aware of his presence at the edge of her vision. He didn't hover but he never left her side. At one point, a wealthy patron approached her, eyes glinting with curiosity. "You're Lila Adeyemi, yes? Alexander speaks highly of you." Lila nodded politely, feeling a subtle tension rise. "Thank you. I admire what he's created here, it's quite impressive." Alexander's voice cut softly across the room just for her. "It's not just impressive, it's a reflection of what's possible when you have the right resources and vision." She glanced at him, keeping her expression neutral. "Resources aren't everything." He studied her, leaning closer just enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. "No. But most people don't realize what power looks like until it's right in front of them. However, you see it and still refuse to be intimidated." Fascinating. Lila felt a flicker of something she didn't like, admiration. For the first time, she questioned whether her independence could withstand this relentless charm, this subtle pull into his world. She reminded herself that wealth and power didn't define character, and yet Alexander's control over the space, over the room, over her attention, it was intoxicating. By evening, the exhibition had moved to a private afterparty on a rooftop terrace. The city lights sparkled beneath them, mirroring the stars above. The air was warm, perfumed with subtle floral scents, and the soft hum of music created an intimate atmosphere despite the crowd. Alexander found her standing apart, her arms crossed loosely as she took in the view. "You seem uneasy," he said, joining her side. "Or is it just that you're pretending?" Lila met his gaze steadily. "I'm not pretending. I'm cautious. This is not my world." "That's true," he agreed, his tone softening just slightly. "It isn't. But that doesn't mean it has to be a dangerous place for you." She turned slightly, curiosity mixed with wariness. "And why would it be dangerous?" He paused, eyes scanning the city below, then returned to her gaze, sharp and penetrating. "Because the higher you climb, the more you attract attention. Not all of it friendly. Not all of it safe." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a hint of truth in his words, a shadow beneath the glittering surface of his world. "I see," she murmured. "And you navigate it without fear?" Alexander smiled faintly, but his eyes were cold for a moment. "Fear is a luxury I can't afford. But those around me, they don't always have the same protection." Lila's mind raced. She had always believed in controlling her environment, in knowing her risks. And yet, standing beside him, she realized she had no control here. This was a world of power, wealth, and hidden danger, and she had been thrust into it unwillingly. For the first time, Alexander's expression softened, just a fraction. "I won't force you," he said quietly. "You have your independence and I respect that. But know this, I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't take people like you disappearing from my world lightly." Lila swallowed, her heart pounding. "People like me, meaning strong, independent women who refuse to be bought?" He smiled, a dangerous, magnetic smile. "Exactly that." The night ended with no clear conclusion, but the tension between them had shifted. Lila realized she was both frightened and intrigued, caught in a world she didn't understand but couldn't fully resist. Alexander had shown her the edges of his world, its beauty, its power, and its hidden danger. And for the first time, she understood that saying no once might not be enough to keep her safe from its pull. As she stepped into a waiting car, she felt the weight of his presence linger in the back of her mind. Alexander Drake was more than a wealthy man who had been refused. He was a force, deliberate and powerful, and somehow, against her better judgment, she wondered what it would take to resist him entirely. By the time her apartment building came into view, a single thought consumed her. She had entered his world, willingly or not, and nothing about it would be simple. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Lila found herself stepping onto the deck of a sleek, private yacht anchored just outside the city harbor. The vessel gleamed under the fading golden light, every detail polished to perfection. The air smelled faintly of salt and expensive cologne, mingling with soft music drifting from the open deck. Alexander Drake was already there, leaning casually against the railing, his tailored navy blazer open over a crisp white shirt. The ocean breeze tugged at his dark hair, and his icy blue eyes scanned the horizon before settling on her with that piercing intensity she couldn't escape. Lila, he greeted smoothly, though there was a trace of something deeper in his voice, a question, a challenge. You made it. I did, she replied evenly, keeping her posture straight. I didn't know the dress code for yachts included billionaires and champagne. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. You adapt quickly. I like that. She studied him for a moment. Alexander exuded the confidence of someone used to controlling everything around him, yet there was something else, an unpredictability that both intrigued and unnerved her. She knew she had to keep her guard up. As the evening unfolded, Lila met some of the guests Alexander had invited: artists, investors, and socialites. Many spoke of him with awe, some with envy, and a few with barely concealed fear. It became increasingly clear that the world Alexander inhabited was glamorous but ruthless. Every conversation, every glance, seemed to carry weight, a hidden meaning beneath polite smiles. Alexander remained near her, occasionally engaging her in conversation but mostly observing. She caught his eyes on her more than once, studying her reactions as though he were cataloging every nuance. Lila felt the pull of his gaze and tried to focus on the surroundings, on the laughter and champagne flutes clinking, but it was impossible to ignore. At one point, a rival socialite approached, her smile sharp and calculating. You must be Lila Adeyemi, she said, her tone sugary but laced with subtle threat. Alexander has mentioned you. How bold of you to navigate his world so casually. Lila's brow arched slightly. I appreciate your concern, she replied politely, but her mind raced. She had anticipated this. She knew that entering Alexander's world would come with scrutiny and subtle challenges, but facing it firsthand was a different kind of pressure. Alexander stepped closer, his presence grounding her. He spoke low enough for only her to hear. Ignore them. This world can be poisonous, but it's all smoke if you focus on what matters. She glanced up at him, and for a fleeting moment she saw not the intimidating billionaire but a man who cared, who could shield, but also dominate, the environment around him. She quickly looked away, reminding herself that admiration was dangerous here. Later, as the party moved to a quieter area of the yacht, Alexander guided her to a secluded corner, away from the crowd and the prying eyes of socialites. The city lights shimmered on the water below, casting reflections that danced across their faces. You're fearless, he said, studying her carefully. Or foolish. Maybe both. Maybe, she replied, her voice steady though her pulse betrayed her. I don't let fear dictate my choices. He leaned closer, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him. And yet you're here. In my world. Walking the edge of danger without knowing it. Lila's heart skipped. The earlier warnings about his world began to make sense. The subtle glances, the tension among the guests, the almost palpable undercurrent of threat. Danger doesn't scare me, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. It informs me. Alexander's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, almost imperceptibly, before his signature intensity returned. You're remarkable, he said quietly. Most people would crumble or cave. You're a challenge. And challenges, I don't forget easily. The words stirred something within her, a mixture of intrigue and caution. She wanted to retreat, to remind herself that no matter how charismatic he was, she could not let herself be ensnared by his world, or by him. And yet she felt a magnetic pull, a dangerous curiosity she couldn't shake. As the night deepened, Alexander suggested a brief stroll along the deck. The soft ocean waves provided a soundtrack, and the wind tugged at her curls, brushing her face with a gentle coolness. You know, he said, keeping his distance but speaking with quiet intensity, most people don't survive in my world without losing themselves. But you. I think you might. Lila met his gaze, searching for sincerity. Maybe, she admitted cautiously. Or maybe I'll expose the parts of your world you don't want anyone to see. His lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Maybe. That's why I like you. A moment of silence hung between them, charged with tension neither fully understood. She felt herself inching closer to him, drawn by an invisible force, yet instinct screamed that this world, this man, was not entirely safe. Then, as if to remind her of the stakes, a commotion erupted near the center of the yacht. One of Alexander's associates, pale and tense, whispered urgently in his ear. Alexander's expression shifted instantly from charming and relaxed to sharp and guarded. He turned to Lila, his voice low but urgent. There's something you don't know yet. Things in my world aren't always as they seem. Not everyone here has good intentions. Lila's stomach twisted. What do you mean? I can't explain now, he said, his gaze locking onto hers. But I need you to trust me. and I understand if that's impossible. For the first time she felt a flicker of fear, not of him but of the hidden currents of his world. She had entered a world of power, influence, and subtle danger. And the man at its center, the man she could neither ignore nor resist, was holding secrets that could change everything she thought she knew. As the yacht sailed through the night, Lila realized that temptation, intrigue, and fear were entwined, pulling her deeper into Alexander's orbit. She wanted to resist, to retreat to the safety of her independence, but something told her that stepping away now was no longer an option. She was already part of his world. And Alexander Drake, for all his charm and danger, was part of her life, whether she wanted him there or not. The night ended without clarity, leaving her with a sense of both exhilaration and unease. She had glimpsed the beauty, the allure, and the danger of Alexander's life, and for the first time she understood that the real challenges were only just beginning. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander Drake's private estate, illuminating the vast expanse of polished marble and gleaming art pieces. Lila had barely slept. The events on the yacht had left her restless, her mind spinning with questions about the man who both fascinated and unsettled her. She knew entering his world meant risk, but she had not anticipated the weight of the unknown lurking beneath the surface. Alexander appeared in the doorway of the sitting room, dressed casually in a dark cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. His icy blue eyes met hers, a mixture of concern and intensity that never seemed to leave him. "Good morning," he said softly. "I trust you slept well?" Lila's gaze lingered on him, wary yet drawn. As well as one can sleep with questions buzzing in their mind. She rose, crossing the room. "Alexander, there's something I need to know. There's tension in your world I can feel. Something you're not telling me." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair as if weighing how much to reveal. "You're perceptive," he admitted. "And yes, there are things you don't know. Things I wanted to protect you from. But perhaps it's time you see why I insisted you be cautious." Lila's heart raced. She had suspected danger, but hearing it hinted at something more real, something that could shatter the fragile trust between them. Alexander led her down a private hallway lined with rare artwork, stopping before a reinforced door hidden behind an inconspicuous panel. With a keycard swipe and a subtle click, the door opened to a dimly lit room. Inside were shelves stacked with files, monitors flickering with surveillance feeds, and a small arsenal of security equipment. "This," Lila began, her voice faltering, "this is protection," Alexander said plainly. "And risk management. There are people who want to control me, exploit me, even eliminate anyone who stands in my way. My enemies are relentless. And anyone close to me becomes a target." Lila's stomach twisted. Her mind raced through every encounter, every subtle glance and whispered conversation. This was not the playful power game she had imagined. This was a dangerous world she had just stepped into. "You're telling me I'm at risk?" "Indirectly, yes," he said, his tone serious, almost pained. "I wanted to shield you from this, from me, from everything I've built. But the truth is unavoidable now. And I can't promise you safety if you stay in my world." She stumbled back, gripping the edge of a desk to steady herself. The reality of it hit her. Her choice to be here, even for curiosity or attraction, had put her in danger. She had refused him before, yet now she was entwined in a life that could threaten her very existence. "Why are you showing me this now?" she asked, voice trembling. "Why not keep me safe like you said?" Alexander stepped closer, the vulnerability in his posture rare and almost human. "Because you deserve honesty. Because I care about you more than I care about appearances or power. And because if I don't tell you, you won't trust me at all, and I cannot bear that." Lila's chest tightened, torn between fear and a strange, reluctant admiration. Here was a man who could command entire industries, yet he revealed a fragile human side, one that sought her trust even as he exposed danger. She faltered, searching for words. "I don't know if I can trust this world, or you." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, not touching but close enough that she could feel the unspoken intensity. "Then stay close," he said softly, "or leave. But whatever you choose, know this, I won't force you and I won't apologize for who I am. I only hope you choose to stay." The weight of his words pressed down on her. Fear, desire, curiosity, and defiance clashed within her. She wanted to retreat, to reclaim the independence she cherished, but the pull of Alexander, the intrigue of his world, and the tension between them made stepping away nearly impossible. Before she could respond, a sudden alert flashed on one of the monitors in the room. Alexander's expression hardened. "That," he said grimly, is why you must be careful. And why the world you've entered is not safe. Lila's eyes widened as she glimpsed the feeds, figures moving near the perimeter of the estate, unknown and shadowy. Her fears spiked, not just for herself but for him. She realized fully that this world was far more dangerous than she had imagined. Alexander moved swiftly, his composure returning, yet his gaze never left hers. You have to understand, this is my life. My choices, my enemies, my secrets. And now you're part of it, whether you want to be or not. She stepped back, overwhelmed by the enormity of the revelation. I need time, she whispered. I can't. I don't know if I can handle this. He nodded, respect and pain flickering across his face. I understand. Take whatever time you need. But remember, once you know the truth, there's no going back to ignorance. And whether you stay or leave, this changes everything between us. Lila turned away, feeling the weight of danger, trust, and desire pressing down on her. She walked toward the door, heart pounding, knowing that leaving now might protect her body but not her mind. The thought of Alexander watching her, torn between protecting her and keeping his secrets, left her unsettled. As she reached the hallway, Alexander's voice called softly, almost a plea. Lila, be careful. And remember, my world is dangerous, but I only want you to be safe. And if you choose to stay, I'll fight to keep you safe. But it will never be simple. She didn't answer. Her mind spun with fear, intrigue, and uncertainty. One thing was clear. The man she had refused was no longer just a stranger or a challenge. He was a force in her life, and his world was a storm she could not easily escape. And as she walked away, leaving him behind in the dimly lit room filled with secrets, she realized their story was far from over. Whether she stayed or fled, the danger, the desire, and the hidden truths of Alexander Drake's world would shape everything between them. Could Lila trust him, or would the secrets of his world destroy the fragile bond that had begun to form? Only time, and choices yet to be made, would tell.